Namaste, Jai Shri Ram. Today we see the very magnificent temple being made in Ayodhya, and it is such a pride for all of us, and which as Indians, not only Indians, but people from many, many countries are seeing this as a victory of triumph of faith. And we Hindus, we Indians are enjoying this moment. But do you know how this moment came in our lives? What is the struggle behind it? What is the 5,000 of years of struggle behind this moment? Today we have with us a very special guest. He is not born in India, he is born in Belgium, Brussels. He's Dr. Koenraad Elst, and he's an Oriental philologist and a historian, and he has written many books on Indian culture, and he has written on Hinduism, on a lot of Hindu culture, on Vedas, on everything. And moreover, he has witnessed every moment in this long struggle. He came to India in 1988 after the struggle started. And after the 86, mainly the struggle started. And today we'll talk to him on how he came to India and what made him to see all this and what attracted him in the Indian culture, which he is so much written about it and he's deep into it. Yes, back to Dr. Koenraad, please. Yes, I'll hold this. Okay, it's okay.
Yes, well, this much is correct that I come from Belgium. I was born in 1959 in Leuven, or Louvain in French, which is exactly like that other Belgian in India, Jean de Geyse, who was also born in Leuven in 1959. Anyway, so there was apparently some India-related vibe in the air that astrologers can certainly tell you
There,
all
in
about.
Belgium only.
Yeah, somehow.
Okay.
Anyway, I don't know what happened.
Just explain that. What was the vibe?
No, that I can't explain. I only conclude that there must have been something in the air that steered us to India.
So, what sort of place is where you stay?
Yeah, well, so I was born in Leuven, which is a town like just east of Brussels. By Indian standards, in Brussels, it's 29 kilometers, I believe. And I now live in Mortsel, which is a town on the way from Antwerp to Brussels. So anyway, it's all,
It's a beautiful place.
distance-wise, it's absolutely nothing compared to India. And I wouldn't call it beautiful. Some foreigners say that it's beautiful, but I don't know. It's a very full place. It's very overpopulated, and that, of course, prepared me well for India, which has the same problem. It's also traffic jams all the time.
Oh, really? Yeah. So when did you come to India?
Well, the first time was in 1988. And so to stay close with our subject, that was a fairly good time to discover the Ayodhya affair. I immediately started reading all the papers here, and so I wanted to know everything that was happening, because what you get to study in, Asian studies has not much to do, or at least in our days, it did not have much to do with what was, today happening.
So you knew Rama before that?
Well, I knew about Ramayana. In that sense, I knew Ayodhya, but I had absolutely no idea that it was a big political controversy at the moment. And so the first thing I learned was that there was a big debate between secularists about the just then happening in autumn 1988, the ban on the Salman Rushdie book, The Satanic Verses.
Okay, yes.
And so the debate was about, whether this was a good thing. And so some secularists said, no, we have to, we have to please the Muslims, we have to they don't use the word appease because appease means that you're dealing with an enemy. But they thought you had to sort of humor and satisfy the Muslims, and that was secularism. And the other side said no, secularism means being critical of and independent of religion. And so, of course, we're all against Hinduism, but we shouldn't give in to Muslim obscurantism either. We are in favor of criticism of religion, as Karl Marx used to say. Criticism of the religion is a beginning of any criticism. And so it's especially the communists who took a hard line and who defended secularism regardless of what the Muslims thought of it. Whereas Congress sites like Khushwant Singh or like back then MJ Akbar used to find justifications for this ban. Now this ban turned out to be connected with Ayodhya because Rajiv Gandhi banned it to please Syed Shahabuddin, who was the leader of one of the two pro-Babri Masjid movements. And he had announced a Muslim march on Ayodhya to coincide with some Hindu festival. So Rajiv Gandhi smelled a bloodbath in the making. So he said to Syed Shahabuddin, sorry, we really want you to call this off. What do you want in return? And so one of the things he wanted in return was the ban on the Rushdie book. So that's also the first thing I wrote about it in the Belgian press. This was news to most people, that this was not some isolated incident. No, this had deep roots in the Ayodhya affair. And so that was the first people there ever heard about the Ayodhya affair.
So that time only the locks were open in 1986 in Ayodhya?
Well, yes, the court opened the locks. The story behind this is that the building was standing empty since 1936 because after communal riots, the British had simply, closed it for religious purpose, both to Muslims and Hindus. And so it was standing empty. After independence, local Hindus, thought that the situation was propitious for installing murtis and starting worship there. Now, the administration allowed it to continue as a temple in the sense that a priest was allowed to conduct the puja there. But for the public, it was not open, it was closed, and so that's where the locks come from.
But there was no order of putting up the locks.
Well, yes, you see, that's the juridical technicality that then, played a role later. So there was no judicial order to lock it, and therefore later when it was discussed in court, the judges found, oh, wait a minute, apparently there was no judicial order, so right now there's no judicial order, so it's allowed. And that's why the locks were removed. It was not Rajiv Gandhi's doing. It was not the government, it was the court that did it.
Court did it, okay. But the locks are open in just one day,
Yeah, those details are becoming a little vague after all these years.
So you came in 88, by the time things were really fired up and Ayodhya was in the international scene, right?
Well, let's say that still everything was possible. That's also how Rajiv Gandhi saw it. You see, right now in the BJP propaganda, it is portrayed as if the Congress has always been anti-Hindu and anti-temple and so on. That's not true. At that time, the majority of Congress members and Congress voters were still Hindus. And the party had a tradition since before independence of trying to be everything to everyone. And so it also had a pro-Hindu face, just as it had a pro-Muslim face.
And the Shankaracharya also was...
Yeah, there were prominent religious Hindus who were with Congress.
Yes.
So Rajiv Gandhi was not at all against the temple. And so his sweeteners to Muslims like the ban on the Rushdie book or like the Shabano act overruling the sentence by the court. So restoring the Sharia as the basis for Muslim divorce and alimony law. That was part of a calculation, okay, some little presents for the Muslims, and then on the other hand, Hindus will get their temple. And at that time, that didn't seem a particularly, daring thing to do. It was not yet a big affair. There was not yet this total polarization. And so he treated it as, the usual Congress-side horse trading. Right. Give them a bit, and everybody will be happy, or at least happy enough. They won't do anything. And so that's not very deep, that's not very principled, but it had the advantage of being mostly practical and without bloodletting. See, so I think that deserved to be tried.
So I'll interrupt you here. We got independence on the religion grounds. We Hindus and Muslims. Muslims got Pakistan and we got India. So, but how then, like Hindus were being, their temples were supposed to be restored after that?
No.
No?
In any treaty regarding independence, there was no mention of restoring temples.
Okay, but then even if when Hindus had put their in a vacant land, if they put their murtis, so what objection was there to the Muslims that time?
Well, the Muslims at that time were hardly a party. Once the murtis had been installed, some Muslims went to court, and they didn't like it, but still, of course, it was not a big affair, and Muslims in general hardly reacted because at that time the Muslims were in a very defensive position.
Yes.
You see, after the partition, and the horrors that it brought, and that were far larger than anybody had foreseen, they felt guilty, or at least they were made to feel guilty. And, they felt the eyes of the Hindus, on them, blaming them that they had brought all this misery. And so they were not yet in a mood to really make their voice heard. So it's not the Muslims, it's Jawaharlal Nehru who tried to, to block it or to turn the clock back and remove the murtis.
Okay.
Yes, absolutely. So he forced, or at least made, the chief minister of Uttar Pradesh do something about it. But then, he delegated the order to lower levels, and by the time it reached the local level, nothing came of it. And indeed, you see a lower official, K.K. Nayar, he made sure that the murtis stayed in place. And it was not that important for Nehru, so he acquiesced in the situation.
So that after that things were quite normal till Rajiv Gandhi in '86. Then again things fired up, right?
Well, in 1983, the movement for the liberation of the birthplace of Rama was founded, not by any BJP people, by the way, but by Hindu Mahasabha member of parliament, Mahanta Vaidyanath, who was the personal guru of the present chief minister of Uttar Pradesh, Yogi Adityanath.
Yes, Hindu Dharma.
And then two Congress people, a local politician called Dayal Khanna, and very important, the former prime minister, Gulzari Lal Nanda. You see, after the death of Lal Bahadur Shastri and before Indira came to power, he had briefly, been a caretaker prime minister. And so he was not just anyone. And it shows, by the way, that at that time, Congress was still largely a Hindu party.
Yes.
in spite of Nehru. And so they started agitating for the liberation of Ram Bhoomi. And so gradually the thing was hotting up. So there were reactions from the Muslim side. When the locks were opened, the Babri Masjid Action Committee was formed. And then a very crucial event that somehow nobody nowadays seems to take into account is the statement by the Jawaharlal Nehru University historians called The Political Abuse of History.
And all the German, I think. Three, four of them.
Well, the big names I remember are S. Gopal, Sarvepalli Gopal, Romila Thapar, Bipin Chandra, a few of those people. And so they declared apodictically that there had been no temple, or that there is at any rate no evidence for a temple ever having been there. This was all a concoction. Initially, the claim was that it was a British concoction who wanted to divide and rule and pit the Muslims against the Hindus, as if they had to do that. There was enough trouble between the two communities. Yes. And on the contrary, they wanted to keep things quiet. At the negotiation table among politicians, wearing a necktie and so on, speaking English, there they wanted Hindus and Muslims and any other groups, to fight among one another. But on the streets, they wanted quiet. They wanted to make money in India, so they wanted everything to function normally. And anyway, I mean, that was very easy to refute. The problem dates from before the British. But then the next line of defense was, it was a concoction by the Hindu nationalists. So anyway, so then it became useful to remind them of all the evidence for the problem being much older. And so you have plenty of documentary evidence that in 89, 90 was collected piecemeal by this scholar and that scholar and so on. Then in 1990, 91, the Chandrasekhar government was supported from the opposition by the Congress party. So Rajiv Gandhi forced him to call a meeting of experts to discuss the evidence. And so that made the evidence official. And that's when it entered the horizon of the courts. And so then it's going to play a decisive role in the Uttar Pradesh High Court's decision making, leading to the verdict in 2010 that awarded the site to the Hindus, and that, first of all, recognized the validity of the evidence. Yes. It recognized that, yes, there was a temple there.
And the ASI also excavations took place.
Well, that's part of the evidence. So you have the documentary evidence that was mostly brought together in 1991. So of course, lots was already available before. More came to light later, but that's the crucial moment. And then for the archaeological evidence, you have evidence in the 70s by B.B. Lau, yes, who dug up the pillar bases around the mosque, which was still standing at the time. And he was given the order by Indira Gandhi herself never to divulge it. That's her.
Indira Gandhi. So many prime ministers were involved. All these prime ministers, somehow or the other.
Yeah, at one. I mean, in the case of Nehru and of Indira, it was only very briefly, but it was very significant. So she tried to put the lid on the evidence,
so that whenever she wants it, she will open it.
Which of course continues. In 2003, again, the eminent historians protest against the very fact of excavations. Yes. Regardless of what the excavations yielded, they were against excavations. And then very recently, you have the same about the Kashi Vishwanath, yes, where the Muslim party objects to archaeological research of that site.
I've been covering courts.
Yeah.
In the courts, the land records have been very clearly forged. Till one time, nothing was in the name of the Muslims. And then slowly, gradually, when the land is somehow consolidated, then suddenly they started saying this is a mosque area, and that in the same area, the names were shifted, and there were clear records, and that same is there in Mathura thing also.
Yes.
Records have been forged and been put like that.
But you see, one thing that complicates matters is that Muslim policies have changed several times. Okay, when the Muslims invaded India, it was the Sharia pure and simple. So no idols, no temples. And so the Sultanate regime, which more or less starts in 1192, but officially in 1206, lasting till 1525, that was the world champion of iconoclasm.
Yes.
So that was absolutely destroying all temples, all the Buddhist universities,
Yes.
for example, were
Yes.
destroyed. And so,
So even the record was there of
yeah.
destroying. Why couldn't the court take cognizance of that? Why they took so much of
But they
time?
did. That it took time, well, I don't know why Indian courts are so slow. I mean, in my country too, the courts are slow. And people say, yeah, nowhere in the world are courts so slow. Then I think, oh my God, look at India. So,
So now
yeah, it took 69 years in the case of the
So
Ayodhya.
now tell me now how do you see this case? It has been now finished, and look at how the now India world sees India now. What is your take on how the world is looking at us now after this power, and how we are going to now further? We going to take our own? I mean, all the mosques, all the temples which are destroyed.
Yeah.
Are we going to work on that?
Okay, first of all, how the world looks at you has not that much to do with what is really happening here, because the world sees it through the lenses, through the glasses that have been put on their nose by the Indian secularists. You see, what you have is in the information spread about India, what you have is the circular argument of authority. So first, the usual suspects in India feed biased or plainly wrong information to their Western contacts.
Yes.
And so there's a sort of mutual relation between them. For the secularists, it is good to have Western friends to show off, look how international I am. And for the Westerners, it's good to have these Indian friends who feed them what they consider as privileged information. And so what they hardly realize is how biased the information is that they are fed.
How the
Anyway, so
for the
then,
nation
then Western authorities start parroting that wrong information. And then in India, they cite the Westerners. See, the enlightened, rational, impartisan West says exactly what we are saying. Well, yeah, of course, they would, wouldn't they? So, here I expect the coming days that Western newspapers, and not only crassly biased papers like the New York Times, but the papers in general, the TV stations in general, are still going to claim that the Hindu claim on the site is dubious, is controversial. Often they will even say it is false, because that is what they remember from the news 30 years ago. I mean, you can put it between brackets. The Western version is not so reliable, but okay. Over here we know better. Let's start from what has really happened. Okay,
Yes,
not
yes.
what the West says, but what really happened. Okay. Well, then it is a very minor thing. Of course, it's only one place, but a special place. Like, you see, all the temples, well, I mean, you can build a temple anywhere. A temple can be replaced, can be moved. But this site itself is important. Rama was born in only one place, and Krishna was born in only one place. So the sites themselves are important. So in that sense, I think it is a reasonable compromise that the Vishwa Hindu Parishad said, okay, those three sites, those we really want back. The rest we don't need to talk about. Now, I think that, you see, now after this success, a few Hindus here and there are saying, yeah, but we want all the temples back. Now, I don't, I think that's the wrong focus. I mean, these temples are not that important. I mean, I can understand the site of Rama's birth is important, okay. But most temples are not that important. You see, of course, everything that is stolen really belongs to you and should be returned to you. In general, that is true, and in the long term, that makes sense. However, you see, these temples are only a symptom of a more fundamental disease, which is the Islamic seizing of the Hindu homeland, materialized mainly in the form of conversions. And so, these sometimes are knife point conversions, but or under social pressure, like under Muslim rule. If you had some dispute with your neighbor, with your rival in business or so, you went to court, and if you converted, if you were the first one to convert, then you would automatically win your trial. Okay, so this way there was all kinds of social pressure that made more and more people accept Islam. And so I think that ultimately is what deserves to be undone. And I wouldn't say this if I wasn't convinced that ultimately a lot of religious beliefs are erroneous and that people really should outgrow them. Now, here, of course, I hear many Hindus sound the alarm and say, hey, this fellow, this Gora, he is turning against religion in general, which, of course, happens a lot in the West. People who are tired of Christianity, who have a bit unpleasant experiences with Christianity, turned away from it, they easily condemn all religion. And, very many Westerners do that, and so that's also an effect you see in the reporting about India. So there is the assumption that, whatever we know about Christianity or about Islam also counts for Hinduism. And so most people don't know much about Hinduism, but this dogma, that they really have, that, oh yeah, it's a religion, so it must be the same. No. So I think that a number of, items of belief in Christianity or Islam really have to give way to more rational insights. And indeed, that's the story of Catholicism, which is my home religion. In my generation especially, there is a collective walkout from the church. And so the main reason for that was the democratization, the more general accessibility of information. And so you see, not that everybody was going to study theology or so, but these insights generally percolated. People started to know, oh, but these are only stories. Jesus was not resurrected from the dead or so. And so similarly in Islam, you see Muhammad never flew on a winged horse to Jerusalem. He didn't hear a voice from heaven dictating to him, God. So I think that these are pretty fundamental beliefs that really will not survive what the Indian constitution calls the scientific temper. Now, in Hinduism, you also have insights that are not going to survive. And I have a lot of quarrels with traditionalist Hindus about issues like the belief that the Vedas have been revealed, just like the Quran. They have not, you can read the Rishis. The Rishis themselves know that they themselves composed the Vedas. They were not dictated to them by anyone. Um, or the belief in the four world ages, that they are 432,000 years and so on. That's not correct. If you read the scripture, you go back far enough, that disappears. So that's a later belief that started. And so I think such beliefs in Hinduism are bound to lapse, are also not going to survive. Nevertheless, whereas in Christianity and Islam, it is the defining beliefs, the most fundamental beliefs that are going to suffer. In Hinduism, it is some dead wood on the side, whereas the core is going to remain. And so when Indian Muslims or Indian Christians rediscover their ancestral civilization, in the long run, not immediately, but in the long run, they will bring their places of worship back. So rather than going for those mosques, temples, you go for the souls, and they will ultimately take care of the
So you
buildings.
have studied all the religions. So what you find in Hinduism little outstanding than the others? If you could briefly, are you impressed with Hinduism?
Yeah.
And do you also follow the religion?
No.
Okay.
Whenever I have to fill out the embassy form to get my visa, they ask me religion. They really secret. They ask that not for the statistic, for knowing how many people are this or that religion. They ask that in case that you die, that what burial should you get?
Yes.
Anyway,
So what
so I always write secular humanist.
Okay. That's it.
And so I don't. I mean, there's nothing that I do that would make me Hindu. You see, all these rituals, I participate in if somebody else does them. But you see, I myself am not going to do that.
But do you
A few mantras I know and I sometimes use.
Sometimes means you believe in them.
Well, I mean, when you say "loka samasta sukhino bhavantu," what is? I mean, that's not true or false. That's just good, and which means may all beings in the world be happy. Okay, so who could be against that, right?
So, okay, I will talk to you about your books. You have
Okay.
written on Ayodhya.
Yes.
How many books you have written on Ayodhya only?
Well, I wrote in 1990 a journalistic book, which looking back I don't find very good, but it covered sort of the state of the art at that moment.
Okay, about
And
Ayodhya.
about Ayodhya. It was called a case study in Hindu-Muslim conflict, Ramzan Bhoomi versus Babri Masjid. And the contents was not very special. It simply rehashed what everybody in India knew. But the important thing was that here was a Westerner saying it. You see, at that point, in India, this sort of academic and media opinion was very firmly anti-temple. And all the Western Indologists and so on, they were safely in their pocket. They all, absorbed this and reproduced this and so on. And so in 1990, there was, by coincidence, in my own home university, the annual Ramayana conference. And you see, there I gave the evidence in favor of the temple. I was puked out, by all these big Indologists. And so, you see, I said there was a temple, and they said there's the ugly, vicious concoction and so on. And, when you look back, you have to say, well, me, you see, as a beginner, I happen to be right. And all these big time professors were wrong, though none of them has ever conceded that. after the court verdict in 2010. There were two American professors of the secularist camp who congratulated me, but otherwise, there's no sign of, they simply look the other way. They don't want to be reminded of their mistake.
So it's very nice to meet you, and we look. You are invited for the Ayodhya event.
I happen to have received an invitation. I'll be going there.
You are always there, and
Well,
you are the VIP guest.
I
and
hope
he's
all the
invited at the Ram Janam place on 22nd
Yes.
of January, and we look forward when he comes back. We'll have another interview, and please tell us
Okay.
what the emotions of the people there,
Yes.
and we would like to listen from you.
Okay.
Thank you so much. Namaste.
Vanakkam, namaste.
Namaste.